Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. This one's gonna be toned down from the other, heavy math stuff. This one is going to be making particles appear on a cube or surface with a low amount of polygons, kind of, but in a way where a texture can affect it so that it'll look like paint scraping off of something. I was inspired by the effect in Loki Season 2, Episode 1, where one character is going through it must be like a time vortex kind of thing. But the paint on the kind of spacesuit that he's wearing is being torn off. So that's what I plan on doing. Let's see if I can actually do it. It should be fairly straightforward, but we'll see. So let's go into GeoNotes. This is going to be a simulation-based effect, simulation zone, but it's a bit weird, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. Because if you want to have particles spawn on a certain part of an object, then you would assign like a vertex group or something along those lines. You would assign vertices to have the particles spawn. But the thing is, I want it to be on a sub-face basis, sub-vertices, sub-face basis, where particles will spawn in, but like only on the dividing line where a gradient would be. So how would one do that? Well, I have an idea, and it might be, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Well, that's all I can promise. We will see how it goes. So, actually, yeah, let's not do simulation stuff just yet. Let's do a little test first. So we have a ton of points. And if we use, say, a position node and say, hey, on only one side of the Z position, go and spawn in. Let's just put this right here. We do that. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. I guess that's because that's on a point basis. So we don't want it to be like, oh, it won't spawn here. I want it so that it'll be right on the line. So how would we do that? Well, the answer would be to go and do it after the fact. After all these particles are spawned in, we go and remove all the ones that we don't want, which this would be a not node. So that will delete all the ones that we do not want. So as we can see right here, it's doing the ones that we are looking for. But there's a few little quirks to this. What if we wanted this to be a texture-based effect? Where we have, well, okay. Like if we had a noise texture, how do we make it so that the particles are only present on a noisy basis? Not something that's... How do I say this right? Okay. We want data from the object to go on the particles, and then we determine stuff. Maybe it would be best to show you, because apparently my brain is not the best at explaining it at the moment. So I'm going to go and store the UV map. So with the UV map, we already have it here, but we just want to keep it as a named... Actually, does that already get inherited? I think it does. Here, let's give that a little check. Does the UV map get carried over to our particles? They do. Okay. I knew that. But now that we have this data, we can now put a texture on that data and then decide what particles that we want. There we go. That's how you say it. So with the UV map, we can say put in a noise texture and then use let's use an equal to node. And we can feed that into the not. Then if we do this, we should see, there we go. So now this is on a sub-face basis. We're taking the data from the object and then putting our texture on it, and then doing the kind of greater than effect. So now we can make it look like it's being eroded away based off of that data. Now the thing is, we want this to be in sync with the shader editor. So how would we do that? Make it so that as this gradient is happening, it's also happening in the shader editor. I thought about that, and then I was like, well, you could just copy it. You could just have the same quote-unquote equation on both sides. Because the noise texture, whether it's in the shader editor or GeoNode editor, is the same, but that means this is also compatible with external textures, ones that you just get. So let's see if I can implement that. My brain's not completely in the game at the moment because I'm still trying to figure some stuff out with the logistics of that. But as we can see, we can, let's bump this up to quite a bit more. We can see that the particles are spawning in where we decide, even though there aren't faces to justify that gradient if it were on the point basis. So if we were to make a little particle sim with this now, let's just set this up really quickly. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay. Store named attribute, let's just add in some velocity. Now, I know that this isn't the right way to add in proper physics, but it's the quick and easy way, which is why I'm doing it. Just with that, all you need is velocity to get a basic particle sim going. That looks mostly convincing. Let's see, so if we do that, we should see that those particles will fall, which I should remind myself that we want these to join in every single frame, so that we get some new data. I've been playing around with more procedural tools recently in a program that some people may want me to be playing with for a while now. Might have been wanting me to play with for a while now. So keep an eye out for some potential stuff based off that. With GeoNodes, I've been a tad burnt out recently because of some things getting postponed, shall we say. Some bugs in, like with simulation nodes and such. So I might take a little break from this kind of stuff and go and dabble with other programs. Maybe I'll get a different perspective using those. Then I'll bring it back into here and then give words. Words are not in my brain today. I apologize, everyone. But yeah, a different perspective from different programs, seeing how they do things, and then bringing it into geometry nodes and seeing how it compares. Because I've done that with Unreal, I've played around with their particle system a little bit for one of my jobs, and it's interesting how that one plays out. It's a bit more complicated, because, well, it's mostly GPU stuff. Let's add in a noise, some noise displacement on this rather than just gravity. Let's make that a lot lower. But with the Niagara system in Unreal, it's a lot more powerful than GeoNodes, again because of the GPU stuff and such. But it's not as easy to use because you can't really interact with the basics all too easily. You can using the scratchpad stuff, but it's much more convoluted to go and like set the attributes that you want. While in Blender, as far as I can tell, in GeoNodes, we have the easiest way of just setting attributes that you want. You just go and have a simple node, you set it, that's good, you can reference it with a named attribute. So that is really, really good. And also the math nodes are much easier in Blender than other programs. But it's good to have the perspective, just to see what works and what doesn't, to see what you can use in both. Okay, so I was going to say enough chatting, but there's going to be a lot more of that going forward. Okay. So I think I'm going to... How would I make the values sync up? So we have this kind of thing happening, where the particles are spawning in, they're doing their thing, they're just going about being all happy. I should probably put in an age parameter so that the particles delete if they're too far. We'll see about that. Or, you know, if they get too old. But again, we'll see about that. Let me put some of this stuff into frames. So I'm going to keyframe our little noise equation here. From 0 to 1. Yeah. 1, that might be a little bit too soon. So I'll put it at 150. So let's do that. Okay, we can see that's still a little bit fast. Maybe, okay, I'm gonna have an outside value node just in case I want to swap out this node with something else. So let's clear the keyframes. Yes. Let's set this to be 1, as I had before. So we have this. Let's set this at 200 or so. Let's see how fast that is. There's a lot of dead time at the beginning. Then that happens. So that could work. Let me try to find out. Here, let's take a look at the viewer node. Oh, that's pretty cool. So that part right there, it starts at point, okay. Oh, and this needs to be linear. I forgot about that. So at around 0.25, let's go and just hit a keyframe there. There we go. And then at 0.75. Yeah, around there it goes to where it needs to be. So I'll just go and extend that. That should be good. Here we go. We can see that that works. So new particles will be joining in. We should have something that's pretty good. So there we go. Yes. I just need to have an age value so that they spawn in, scale up, scale down, all the good stuff. And they also delete. But that's how you get that kind of working. I need a little bit... Let me implement this stuff and then I'll try the syncing, because I'm not sure how that'll work. It should work. But let's see if it does. I would just need to copy these nodes, the ones that I can copy, and then just animate it the same. Or I could have an animated attribute on the mesh. That's the output for both of those, and then use that as the parameter. We'll see. We will see. Okay, this will be velocity. Let's add the age value. Let's just move it over. Named attribute. Like adding in an age value, in other programs, they have built-in ones. While with us making our own particle systems, you know, we need a wrong value. We need to make our own. But the thing is, it's incredibly easy to make our own because we have such easy access to getting and setting attributes. Okay, so I'll just set the radius. Yeah, the set radius. Yeah, set point radius. There we go. I'll just set that so that it will scale up and then scale down. I'll use a map range node. How long should they last? Maybe 30 frames. Let's use a float curve. Or maybe a color ramp. Yeah, let's use a color ramp. They're more controllable. Let's see. And then I'll multiply it in the end. Not a vector math. I want a regular math. Let's go right here. 0.05. There we go. And then I also... Here, let me go and just move this over. I need to make a delete if you're too old kind of thing. So delete geometry. Just need that. And then say, hey, if you're greater than... I'll just make that regular greater than. So greater than... If you're greater than, say, 30, because that's what I had in that range, then you will delete yourself. So let's set that to be 30. Let's go and do that. Let's raise it up. So the fading, yeah, that should be fine. I'll set it to ease. I'm not sure if that's needed. But yeah, this will just be delete. And this will be age. Let's see. Are the devs giving you new nodes to try? No. No. All the nodes that I try out are... Oh wait, that didn't scale down, that's why. Though these are in the experimental daily builds. Most of these are in 4.0 already, but I use 4.1 because I'm holding out for simulation nodes being fixed. The bake node. Oh, is the bake node in here? Bake. Or checkpoints. Nope. Those are still being worked on. So if we have something like that, we can see that, yeah, that does work pretty well. Let's set this to be a little bit smaller, because I want to see more stuff happening there. Maybe I should also set the normals so that the particles have to be facing outwards. Yeah, I'll store it after the deletion, just so that might be a little more efficient. Normal, so that now, if we have that, or I should have that in a separate frame, so this will be, spawn line, I guess? If we have the normal, we can just add that in to the thing. Since I took out the gravity, well, I kind of do want to keep the gravity. Yeah. I've been looking to get a bit more involved with geometry nodes development in terms of feedback, because I've had quite a bit of feedback to give due to a lot of, you know, geometry node quirks. I'm sure you've seen quite a bit of it. But I've been looking to give that feedback in a constructive way. I've seen people who have been like, hey, you should implement this for the Blender game engine. And it's like, you don't do that. Don't do that. Feature requests that are completely out of left field, the devs really dislike. I'm hoping that the stuff that I bring up in terms of the common workarounds are good, constructive, and don't come off as, hey, add this feature, because it's a hard balance, because features are definitely needed in GeoNodes for it to be better. Like, I bring this up a lot, but the curve to mesh node, there's no good way of having a UVs out of that. There were plans on making a curve to mesh UV node. I haven't been able to find that project in the Blender dev chats and stuff. So I'm assuming that someone was working on it, but then they started working on other projects, so it got left in the dust. But something like that is essential for this node. This node is not complete without that, because it needs that data. And all the workarounds either require editing the topology, which is not good, not functional, because that would break the fill caps kind of thing. Or they are just way too complicated when it could just be an output, just like it is with the cylinder. That has a UV map output, the curve to mesh does things. It needs that similar input. And then there's stuff like the geometry node editor, the simulation node, the simulation zone. That needs materials. That's one thing that the developers know about it. The checkpoint node uses the same technology as the simulation zone. That one's coming up. But that also means that that one also has the materials just get wiped data. And with the materials being wiped out, that was because since the materials were not stored properly, there would be sometimes different results between what you would see in the viewport and what you would see in the render, which is why it was removed 2 weeks before 3.6 came out. It was a bug that was very finicky. The downside is that bug, they were thinking about fixing it in 4.0, but it was way too late. The cutoff for making new features was like a few days out, so they pushed it back again and such. But I'm looking forward to when things like that become feature complete. And in terms of new ground, there was recently a new ground in which I want to give feedback for. There was something about getting an active camera node in there, in which there would be like an object input, and right now you could use like the self object to put that in there, which would give you the object's own data, which is good. But the proposal was to have an active camera object that would be fed into here. But as I brought up in that thread, there's a little bit of a problem with that. All you would get, and I guess this is the object info node's limitations as a whole, you can only get the location, rotation, and scale. But what about, say, the object color, or with the camera, which this is why I brought up. What if you wanted, say, I don't know, the focal length, the clip start, the clip end, the depth of field thing? I could see how that could be useful for a lot of geometry node editor people. But all of that data, and like the screen resolution stuff, all stuff that would be very essential for an active camera node. But the object info node would not allow for that because it's only limited to these inputs. What I kind of proposed was having basically, it would be kind of like the named attribute node, but it would be for view layer and object data properties, so that the object info node would basically be supercharged. You would be able to put like an object input into here, and then you can get all the named attributes that are in there. Because Blender, apologies if I'm going too much on a tangent, has a lot of attributes. Which, actually, let's go into the shader editor, because this thing is almost ready to go, I would think. Blender has a lot of named attributes. So there's frame underscore currents. And these ones you can find with like the Python tooltips or the documentation. Let me wait until Eevee boots up. Let's switch this to view layer. This will give you the actual frame data. So it's like the driver, except a lot more responsive and faster. So if I were to say use a wrap node, we would see that this repeats every couple of frames. But you can get other data. Like here we go, we can see that repeats. But you can get stuff like the frame start, which would be the start of the timeline, which is very useful for some animated effects if you want them to loop. So if you have frame start and frame end, you could, say, use a map range on the frame current, so map range, and get a gradient from the start to the end that's kind of normalized. Let me hide this. So if we do this, we can see that that gradient gets brighter and brighter until it gets to 250, in which the animation will be complete. But stuff like that would be extremely useful to have in geometry nodes. More useful, I would say. You can currently get the data with drivers, but that's slow and clunky and quite unreliable. So having it in a more official capacity would be very nice. That would be kind of my proposal. And also, you can get the 3D cursor location. Cursor.location. I think this will work. We'll see if I remember it. Yep, there we go. You can get the 3D cursor location with this data. Currently in the geometry node tools, there's a dedicated node to bring in the 3D cursor data into there. But it's already... you could technically already get this in regular old geometry nodes, and I guess the tools as well. You would just have to go and add in drivers, which is clunky. And you can't get all the data types that you need. It's only floats, so for a vector input, you would have to add in a driver for each and every input, which is not ideal, shall we say. But I say all that to say, some of the nodes are fairly limited. With geometry nodes, I would say one of the biggest limitations is getting data into geometry nodes, the data that you want and need. So having nodes that would allow for that in a more generalized capacity, where the developers don't have to manually add each one every single time, would be good. Would be probably better. So instead of having to add in an active camera node, which I still think should be in there, it should probably just have a ton more inputs, which the devs have kind of hinted at in their response to the current development on that node, but probably not for 4.1. They said, I think they said it could be possibly be improved once it's in the main branch of Blender, but we'll see. Here, I should add in the texture thing for this as well. Sorry that I'm getting so sidetracked. But, you know. Commentary is nice to hear. I hear. Now, was that at 200? That... Right now, I'm trying to sync up. Here, let me split the window. For this, I'm trying to sync up this with that. So basically, it's the same values on both. So right here, I have the value be there, so I need to make it the same for both. Now, could I sync it up with an attribute that's across both? Yes, that would probably be better. Actually, wait a minute. Oh no, but that would... I was thinking, oh, I can animate the object color to have the same gradient across, you know, geometry nodes and that. And that would work if we had, like, the object layer attribute node in geonodes. Because we have that in, here. If we just put in object color, we can get the object color in the shader editor, which, to be fair, you could do before with the object info node. So here's a good comparison. You can get the location, the color, the alpha, object index, random, all that. With the node inside geometry nodes, we have, we can get like the rotation and the scale of that in there, but also you could just type in scale on the object domain, and now you have the object's scale in there. So you could have a node that the developers have to code or implement themselves, which is limited. There will always be more attributes to put in. Or you can have a generalized node, which can access a ton more data. The downside is you'll have to, you know, look it up in either the Python tooltips or the documentation. But having access to all the data, even if you have to look it up, is much better than not having access to the data. So, yeah, so if I were to put in rotation underscore Euler, and there was something that one of the devs mentioned with the dependency graph. I'm not sure if that's a reason why it's not implemented in GeoNodes, but if it is, that would be unfortunate, but understandable. But yeah, you want all the data from your object. You can even get the parent object. If this object has a... Okay, I'm gonna nerd out on this a little bit more. Here, let's just... Let's say you want the parent's location. You could just do parent.location. If we do this, we can see that it's following the location of the parent object. If this one moves, nothing happens. It's getting the data from there. That's currently impossible to do in geometry nodes unless you use drivers that can access this information. But having it natively implemented would be very nice. So, again, I said all that to say, like with GeoNodes development, I have some suggestions and feedback to it. But if I were just go and say, hey, add this node, it wouldn't be good. That would be not encouraging, shall we say. Okay, let's, here we go. So we should see, okay, it's, here, let me make sure that is linear. This, if I set this up correctly, this would mean that, yeah, something's not right. It should be, though. Oh wait, no, these are just animated on two separate scales. So that's at 0.425, and that's that. But yeah, I want to find a way of making helpful suggestions and feedback on like the current workarounds that us geometry node people have to do and such. Oh right, this starts out at 0.25. And give feedback without coming off as, hey, add this feature. Because, you know, that's not encouraging. Okay. So now we can see that these two values are now in sync, because essentially we did the exact same math operation on both. This could be a texture or something. But another thing that I just realized, if we want this to be more editable later on, we should have this be added to there. So if we do this, ooh, yeah, what value does that have to be for it to be the same? Okay, so it has to be 1. So if we add to the value, then that means I can still access the gradients in the shader editor. So these two have to be in sync, the same nodes, the same thing. And then here, if we set that to 1, or maybe it should be 0.5, would that be better? Not sure. But there we can see that that happens and it works. But what I want is to get a gradient, at least for a gradient or a greater than, one of those, so that I can have it so that a material switch could occur. Let's set that to 0.9, 0.99. There we go. So here are the particles. We can't see the particles because Eevee does not have particle viewing yet. Maybe in the next one, maybe in 4.1. We'll see if that ever happens. But here we should be able to see, wait, if I select the particles, that those two are now in sync, which is good. So material gradients, and then this will be geonode gradients. Geonode gradients. These two, again, I'm reiterating again and again and again, these need to be in sync, or else this just straight up won't work. It's fortunate that the noise textures are the same. That's a very good part of consistency between the editors, which another point of feedback, I would say. If we had the scene time node, that wouldn't be the case, because we don't have the scene time node in the shader editor. But another reason why this node is so good, we can make our own scene time node. But unfortunately, it's a little bit broken because of the dependency graph, where you would have it so that you can have the... What's the thing again? If you were to get the frames per second and then get, yeah, what was the Python tooltip for the frames per second? I am forgetting. Was it just frame, oh wait, frame.fps? Oh. Frame.fps? Nope, it's not that one. What was it? Oh, scene.fps. Was that it? Nope. Render.fps? Okay, there we go. Render.fps. That's how you can get the current frames per second of this, which you currently can't do in the shader editor otherwise. But if you have that in combination with the frame current one, you can make your own scene time node. So, frame current. The only downside is, as I kind of hinted at before, for some reason, frame underscore current doesn't update when, like, every time you play the animation in cycles specifically. But that's how you get these seconds as a scene time node. So that is, oh, you got the scene time node in the shader editor. The devs did not implement the scene time node in the shader editor, just the compositor and the geonode editor, but thanks to these nodes that are very general, we can implement it ourselves if it's needed in a pinch. So that's the benefit of having such a generalized node. Okay, so with enough talk about that, let's go and make it so that we can see our particles. Instance on point. So let's do the instancing. Most of you have seen this before. What should I have? Let's have an icosphere as a primitive. We can plug that into there. Here we can see, oh dang, we got a ton of icospheres. But they're too big, so they need some editing. I could have the radius. Oh yeah, I forgot that's a regular attribute. So again, with the named attribute, you can either have the radius, which is hard-coded into Blender, or you can just access it here. So all of that data, you can get more data, like sharp underscore face. Wait, is there sharp faces? No, there's no hard-coded node for that. So if you want to get that data, it's just available here in the attributes. So instead of the developers having to put in a node for everything, it's just already there, which I think is a more efficient method. But for this, let's use the velocity, let's use the align Euler to vector node. And again, I should specify, don't say, hey, developers, do this. I've seen people do that, and it is... you get secondhand embarrassment from that. And you might be banned from the chats. Let's see, with this, we should see that the particles, the radius isn't being included right now, but we should see that the particles are now scaling according to their velocity, which gives the illusion of motion blur. There we go. So that could be pretty cool. And then I just need to implement the radius to scale. Should I just scale the X and Y, or... There were also talks that I saw recently in the Blender dev, or the meeting notes, the weekly meeting notes, that this node is going to be getting a revamp. So instead of just having, well, no, there will be another node where you can have like a normal and a tangent input, and it'll output a rotation, which is good, because that means that you won't need to chain two nodes. You can just have one and it'll do everything else for you, which is a nice ease of use kind of thing. Okay, I could just map range the radius and then put it into there. Well, actually, wait. No, the radius is already decided. I don't need to map range it because I already set it using that. So that's good. Yeah, I think that's acceptable. Let me just go and move this out of here. So I've been toying around with other programs, other procedural programs. We'll see if it amounts to anything. Just to see what's out there, seeing what works, what's possible in the other programs. Ooh, oh, wow. The radius is looking pretty interesting in that regard. But, it's interesting how I've been playing around with Houdini a little bit. It's been a while since I've looked at it. I think the last time was literally years ago. But I was like, you know what, let's see what's happening in there and see how I can use that tech in my projects. It was interesting how in Houdini, everything, like low-level nodes like this, like math nodes, they're not really that prevalent in terms of, like, most of the time you won't be seeing these nodes like you do in GeoNodes. You'll be looking at big pre-built nodes that have their own systems inside of them, and then you go and plop attributes in them and then they do stuff. While in Blender, since everything is fairly low level, you go and mostly, like, the inputs and outputs are all a bit harder to figure out just by looking at them. And there's also no colored strings, which is a real shame. But there's a lot more stuff going on under the hood than with, say, geometry nodes. So for me, someone who is very, relies a lot on the visual stuff, seeing where the path of data is going, geometry nodes is easier to use. But with the other programs, it would be, I'm interested in learning more about it, see how it functions. Okay, with this gradient, let's go and throw it into a good old color ramp. Might need multiples of these, but who knows? So we have that happening. And let's have a nice bright orange that fades away into a dark black, making it look like the object is just fully being eroded away. Let's set the radius to be much smaller, because that is... I should set the radius in post. I should have the scale factor be a thing. Like, look at that. That's... like, seeing geometry nodes and the other stuff being in sync is very... it's very good to see. Like, again, the topology is that. Like, to get this on geometry would require millions of polygons. And that's not an exaggeration. But having it as a texture reliant on the UV map, like, look at that. That's a lot better. And it just needs to be in sync between the two, which could be a bit bad, but it's alright. Also, I'm going to... I wonder what is easier. I want to see what's more expensive. Setting a material after the thing? No, it takes under a millisecond. So, yeah, I can do that. I'll have another material that'll be the particle material. But also, one thing to note, in one of the latest builds of EV Next, oh yeah, look at that. It has potential. It has potential. I just need to throw up a little more of a smoke screen for it. This will be particles. Like, also, with that view layer attribute, or object/view layer attribute node that I'm thinking of, imagine if you could get, like, material references based off that. Like, you could get this in the shader editor, but the data is kind of useless because The materials, you can get all the data from the materials, like, oh, what's the input, like is backface culling enabled, which could be useful for some projects. Like, oh, if backface culling is enabled or not enabled, throw up a little warning thing to inform the user. But, yeah, having data that can access a lot more data would be nice. Again, I don't know how technically feasible it is to do that, so I'm just, again, talking out of just a user perspective, not a programming perspective. Because, unfortunately, I do not know C++. If I did, it would be nice. I'm interested in contributing in the ways that I can. So if I do this, and the particles should be different sizes. Yeah, I should go and make this a little bit... Like, if I spawn in 1,000 particles, hopefully this won't... Wow, that's actually not... Okay, yeah, it's starting to lag. Oof, yeah, starting to lag a significant degree, but look at that. The result is pretty good. Let's throw in a bump node. Have this be the height. Then I'll plug that into the normal. And then set that to be a negative. Now, it looks like I'll need another map range for that. Oh, wait. No, it's the amount of instances that's lagging. Well, that's mostly lagging everything. So if I do this, then we should see... There we go. Something more along those lines where it actually looks like it's eating away at it. Could be cool. Let me set it to be quite a bit less invasive. So now that we have a material switch, we can now make that look a little bit better. Again, particles need to be better, a lot of things need to be better about this, but I can do that. I'm wondering if I should also billboard the particles. Like, look at, like, yeah, that... Making it so that they're not icospheres, but rather, planes where I can put a texture on them, so that it could look maybe a little bit better. I'm going to make a few changes. One is that I'm going to make the radius be a value that I will multiply in post, so that it won't affect the data before, and I can, say, scale it dynamically without it messing everything up. So with this, I can multiply it by a random value, which I need to double check if I need to go and make an ID attribute for the particles, but yeah. We will see. 0.01. So I still want the particles to very much be visible. Yeah, that's... Allow me to cook. Loves this project. I'm having a really bad time UV mapping instanced objects. Not sure if you can share the logic. UV mapping instanced objects. Interesting. That must be a very old comment, and I apologize for not reading that earlier. But with whatever named attributes you have on the geometry you have as an input, the distribute points on faces node will just carry that through. And even on the instance on points node, it will carry it through. You just need to access the data on the, at least in this node, you need to get it on the, oh wait, not like that. You can access the named attribute that's UV map, but this will be on the instance domain because this the objects got instanced on the points, it will now reference that data. But another cool thing is that with the particles, with the attribute node, just the generalized one that could be on geometry, object, instancer, and view layer, if we have this on instancer and then put in UV map, we should see that these ones inherit the UV map from the thing they were spawned from, because the data gets carried over. Which means that if this object has a texture, the particles that I'm spawning in can and will inherit it perfectly, which could be pretty cool. Like again, if I were to connect this into the output here and then have the UV map, and this is also another interesting thing, you can have the UV map from instancer, or you can just use the other node, which is a little less, I don't know, a little less iffy. Let's see, how do I make the points look a bit better? Let me reduce it so that's 500 instead of 1,000 per frame, something that I should specify. So we have that. And I should probably also have a mix node so that I can mix between one color and then the other thing. So that and then the erosion color. Let's go and bring that down by a bit. Oh, nope, that is... No, actually, no, that was right. So which one looks like it's higher? No, that one seems to be good. Maybe I need to make the bump a little bit more just so that it shows up a little bit better. Here, let me just do a little bit of... Yeah, no, that was not the best idea. It's weird because I'm like, how do I make it look convincing? So I think I will need a billboard particles, even though that might be a little worse for the old GPU on this, but we'll see. And also, this should work. If I were to bevel our cube, this should work pretty much the same. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so the cutoff for the material needs to be a lot harsher. So let's go and set that to 0.01. So there we can see that's happening, which is pretty cool. But the problem is, I wonder, is there a way that I can get around this? If I make the lifetime, yeah, let's go and set a lifetime attributes. So this will be particles. If we go and set a lifetime attribute, I can then set that to be a random lifetime, which could be very useful. So maybe, yeah, I'm going to store a lifetime attribute here, which it's so simple adding attributes in GeoNodes compared to Houdini. You can do that using the create attribute node in Houdini, but it's not as easy. There are way more settings, which might give more functionality, but for my little bit of experimentation, it's a little bit clunky. Like, Houdini's UI has remained pretty much, has been very similar from like 8 years ago. I've been watching tutorials from Intagma and such from, or well, Houdini and Intagma, and some of the ones are like 8 years ago, and the UI is exactly the same from what, it's probably changed a bit, but the icons are the same and such. So it feels a little bit dated, but I'm willing to give it a go. It could be a useful tool in my belts. Let's have a lifetime attribute. Not lift time. Lifetime. We're at almost 50 minutes right now. I'm okay with it because I've been talking most of the time. So if I set this between 0 and 30. Oh, and I'm gonna have to make this... Yeah, I'll need to go and plug in the random frame range. Or randomize it per frame. Yeah, so that and that. So I just need to plug this into the delete geometry part. So, lifetime. Oh, wait. And I need to go and reset the cache. So that happens. I think the Blender devs have fixed the bug in 4.0/4.1 where if you control Z in geometry nodes with a sim node or repeat zone happening, I forget which one. No, sim node, where it just breaks and you have to restart the file. I think they did because I haven't run into it within the last couple of days. But yeah, if we do this, we should see that the particles now have, yeah, much more varied lifespans. So now I can bump this up and it won't lag because some of the particles get deleted. That's a little bit better. Not too much, but a little bit. My goal is to have a lot of particles where the thing spawns in so that it doesn't look as bad. And then, yeah. So we have stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Yeah, let's go and change up these particles. So I think we'll need to make... Another good reason for an active camera node is so that you can face particles towards the camera. Like a rotate instances towards camera node. Which we currently can't do unless you have a ton of drivers. But yeah. So for this, how am I going to do this? I could just have... Yeah, let's do the crisscross plane method. So 2 planes where the UV maps are pretty much the same. Then I put a material on them that looks kind of like maybe a little dusty, maybe a little smoky, just so that they look good. Let's go and plug that into there. So if we do this, we should see that they look, wait. Why did I decide to instance the camera? Oh, that is funny. But here we should see that now those are being shown up, which I will make their radius is a bit bigger. I could just, yeah, I don't need that anymore because I could just have the material on the plane and then it'll inherit it. The radius, let me go and bump that up to 2. I should also go and randomize the seed. There we go. So something like that should work. Oh wait, I need to make it so that this is the z-axis because that's how I oriented everything else. Yes, there we go. So now we have the kind of Minecraft billboard kind of things. And now I can apply the particle material here, then do some fun stuff with it. So I could get the UV map that is not on the instancer domain, and then I should name it something different. Well, no, well, UV map P. Should be fine. There we go. It's interesting that when I rename that, it doesn't automatically change there. It happens in, well, with materials and such, but probably a Python thing. So if we have that, oh, are these facing the right? No, I need to go and rotate this again because I want the bottom to be the bottom. There we go. So now that we have this, let's noise texture this. And vector math multiply. Let's have this be pretty good. 0.5 maybe. Here we go. So they're the same on every single one, so we can use the object info node, random, which I actually want to check. Because this means currently there's not really a good way of getting the current object info in geometry nodes, like if it's random or like the object color and such, stuff that might be useful. Okay, so that's not it. Maybe there's like an ID attribute. Let's just try ID. I'll need to look at the documentation in order to get that. But yeah. But I can't detect if it's a holdout. Actually, yeah, what is this? This is holdout. Okay, so is underscore holdout, which this could be useful in for something. Because if I check that... Oh, wait. Oh, right, because those are instances, yeah. I picked the one thing where it would be like, oh, wait, if it's checked, then you can't see it. Let's do selectable. So hide, select. Hide, underscore, select. Wait a minute. Did I? Oh, I spelled it wrong. Of course. My greatest enemy. Spelling. Yeah, so here we can see, oh, it's interesting that it's inverted. Huh. That's funny. But yeah, getting that kind of data, like all of that data, would be very useful, shall we say. Hey, I love your work. Do you take requests for project concepts? If you're... It kind of depends on what you mean. If you mean, like, commissions, I am currently very much booked. I have multiple big projects that I am working on that I cannot go into because I am NDA to hell. But, yeah, currently not available for commissions, but if you're meaning, like, hey, you should try making this in GeoNodes, I'll take it into consideration. I can't promise anything because, again, I am rather busy with other stuff off camera. While I do stream, this is kind of like my R&D time where I'm testing out new stuff. But a lot of my other time is very much occupied, shall we say, by very cool stuff, which you all will be able to see sometime in the future. Separate XYZ. You are a wizard. Why, thank you. I've always liked the procedural abilities, though I will have to say, how much time a week do you spend on Blender? My head is saying a number, and I do not like the number that I am thinking of, so I will just not say the number. It's a bit too much, but I am cutting back on it. Right now, I can't say much, but quite a few projects are needing my attention. So it is a significant amount. Let's see. Oh, wait, that needs to be a smooth min. Oh, no, wait, I should use color ramps, not ping pongs. Here, let me just go into here. I keep forgetting to do control space to open. Yeah, and I should get screencast keys back online. I had the add-on, and then I just, forgot to update it. That's one reason why, when it's like, oh, why don't you make add-ons? It's because of that. I want to make things that are reliable for other people, no matter what version of Blender they're, well, things that will be useful going forward in Blender, like add-ons are very common to break, or even just get disabled when you update Blender. And having things that don't need to be constantly manually maintained and, well, where the user doesn't have to constantly maintain them and make sure that they're in the file. That's why I like geonodes. They're integrated into Blender. I can make tools with them that other people can use and I can use quite often. Let me set that to linear. I'm getting a little annoyed with that right there, so I'm just going to move that up. Let's mix RGB linear light. Fun fact about this node, this is the old mix RGB node, because this is still used in the compositor. And the only way you can access it is if you assigned it as a quick favorite before the new mix RGB became a thing. Which is very funny, because the new mix node, you can do float, color, and all that. It's a big node. It's significantly bigger than it was, which I have very mixed feelings about. It could do with a sub panel, shall we say. There's a weird thing with Blender where the nodes just keep getting bigger. Like, they keep expanding. Like, the noise texture, like, a year or two ago, was, like, maybe 75% of the size. So, it's a good thing subpanels are now a thing, but currently they're a thing with node groups and the principled node. They're not really implemented with everything else yet. Well, I will say, the subpanels were implemented on the node that needed it most. This thing was way too big. It did get bigger in the latest update. So if you expand all the panels, that's way too big. But in the previous versions of Blender, it was like from normal up, well, actually maybe a little bit less. But it was still a huge node with too many inputs, when most of the time you would only use these ones, and maybe emission, which I'm actually kind of happy that one's at the bottom, because it just means, oh, yeah, you just plug it in there on the bottom. It's not in the middle. But, so, like, this node is a major improvement to the last one, and it's kind of weird. I've seen one or two people complain about it, and I do not get those complaints. This is a significant improvement. My only one kind of, this is very optional, but having a subpanel for the main ones might also be a good idea, but it's probably not necessary, which is probably why they didn't implement it. But it does look a little bit weird to have the subpanels here and then just have these ones there. Well, Like, that's just a little nitpick. An optional thing that does not need to be... It doesn't need to be in there. Okay, so let's stop dawdling. Dawdling, wow. I haven't said that word in ages. And let's go and plug this into the alpha. Let's go into here and set this to be alpha clip. And also alpha clip on there. Or should this be alpha blend? It's more expensive than an alpha clipped. Or for you Unreal people, alpha masked. Or just masked. Which is interesting because in Eevee Next, there won't be a masked method. It'll just be dithered and then blended. Or I forget what it is, and I'm not going to check because Eevee Next has regularly crashed me again and again. So now we can see it looks a little more like paint flakes, but it needs to be better than that. Let's see, we have that. It looks okay, but if it was alpha blended, it could be even better. I don't think we need shadows for this. Oh yeah, we can see the viewport is loving that. Because it's treating each of these as objects, which means that there's like, I don't know, like 5,000 alpha computations happening. Which, as you can imagine, isn't great. So let me just adjust this. Alpha hashed would be probably the better option. Yeah, no, let's go back to alpha clip. Let's go back to things that will not lag me out at every possible turn. This is still, you know, not the best. I think the crisscross pattern is a little bit less than ideal. But we can see that the particles are looking pretty good. We're past an hour now, so I should start wrapping everything up. But, we'll see about that. I also want to make the kind of transition texture a lot better. But we'll see about that. The main goal... Actually, let me go in the GeoNode editor. Let's make it so that the particles spawn in a lot faster. So that it can look more like... Less like the particles are fading into existence. And more like, oh yeah, they're just there. Let's make the radius a bit bigger. Maybe let's set the minimum radius to be that so that we have to see all the particles. They can't just hide in being too small. Make it a little bit bigger. Just feel it out, vibe it out, see what works. I think that feels okay. Like, the crisscross pattern is definitely distracting. I would have them be billboards, but, you know, we don't have a good active camera node. Well, no, we don't have an active camera node. I would have to build it myself. Which is another thing with GeoNodes where it's like, oh, you have to basically build everything yourself. But that's a weakness because that means beginners won't be able to do hardly anything. But it does allow for much more control. Having the low-level stuff means that I can implement whatever I want into my particle system, but it also means that I need to build my own particle system, which, for those of you who have watched my streams, whenever I try to do anything in regards to collision math, whether it be particles or rigid body physics or anything like that, I always have the most wonderful time. Sarcasm, heavily implied. Okay. So I think we need a very harsh step. Yeah, looks like I'll need to use a color ramp. And maybe a map range before it's... Let's go and plug that into there. I'm going to make it so that it goes between 1.5 and 0.5. The Blender devs, from what I've seen, their plan is that... Oh, I could also undo that. Their plan is that we'll be making node groups, and then those will be the nodes. In the sense that, like, we make the node, they give us the tools to make the node groups that we need to make in order to add in the basic functionality. Like, the basic medium level nodes, like, I don't know, distribute points on faces, but the faces can deform. And stuff like curved mesh UVs. And then, well, that one's technically in a feature that was gonna be made, but kind of got semi-abandoned. It's not currently in development. That's what I know. And then, here we have that. Does that look good, or I don't know. I could maybe turning up the roughness will look better, which, just as a reminder, you need to do on both of the gradients because they need to be in sync. There are probably better ways of making them feel in sync. Oh, dang. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. How do we make this look better? Okay. So a few things, just making, since I don't want to alpha blend this, I need to just make it better, which actually I can add, yeah, let's do a manual linear light. Okay, let's organize this a bit more because this is getting just a little bit out of hand. Do. So we subtract by 0.5, multiply, that's basically a linear light. Then we add it into there. And also Houdini. It seems like coding the Vex system is pretty prevalent in there. Which it would be... People have suggested this before, but having a scripting node would be nice to have in geometry nodes, but it's also more complicated. Because in Vex, it's like, okay, here's the system for it. Here you have the value, and then plus this, plus this, plus that. So in Blender, I think if they did implement that, I think they could implement that in a very good way, but it might be a little too niche for how Blender usually works. But then again, we have the OSL, the script. Yeah, we have the script node in the shader editor, so could be cool. No, whoop. Okay, that's weird. My control key has been a little bit funky. I should use a greater than here, but I'll keep it as this. With the alpha clip, it gets greater than to 0.5. But then again, when the changes happen, well, we'll see. Like, I just want to make this a little more, yeah, a little more varied so that it looks a bit more like... Actually, with compression, you probably can't even see this. But if I zoom in, you can see it now. Like, how big should those noise chunks be? How do I make it, like, not look too varied, but still look like, you know, they're not just solid little particles? Actually, I think I'm gonna need to get rid of the crisscross. It's just way too distracting. Like, if we do that, they just turn into flakes, which isn't the worst, but they're not pointing towards the camera. But I think, I don't know, I think it's okay. Turn off shadows on them. Oh, good, yeah, good idea. Yeah, like, in some renders you would want the shadows, but they're not strictly necessary. Here it's, like, here, let me go back to you. It's going up the noise displacement. I could turn up the detail to make it a little bit more, but I'm not quite seeing the depth that I would like. It's close, but something's holding it back. I'm not sure what that is. But it's looking pretty good. It's giving a convincing, oh, it's being eroded away. Maybe, oh, wait, maybe it's the bump map on the dark part. Maybe that's not supposed to be there. Actually, yeah, that's probably not supposed to be there. Because you want it to look like the paint is 3D, but it's revealing the other stuff. So if I cause just a little bit more bleeding, figuratively, but that goes without saying, we should see something more along those lines. Right now it looks like that, which does, looks kind of cool, but I still feel like it needs a little bit of bump. So many quotes in the, when you're working on Blender stuff can really be taken out of context Well, they sound quite funny out of context. See, there's that. I don't know. I guess it's just fiddling with the values to see what really matches. But yeah. Like the complicated part, like the part that's specific to this setup is just this. This is the only thing that's special about today's live stream. This and that. Just having those two be in sync. One of them decides which particles are kept in a line. All of this I've done hundreds of times before. This will be start data. And then everything else I'm just going in, fooling around with. Just seeing, would this look good? Would that look good? Like here, all I need to do is put in, like, I guess I could even do 2 shaders on the main material. One for the surface and then one for the underneath part. That would look like the cube is disintegrating. But yeah, lots of, could do it like that, like, And I should mention that this will work on any object, just maybe double check how many particles you're spawning in before you do it, because since with Houdini, they have a scatter node, which is basically the distribute points on faces node. But with that, they have many more options rather than just those 2. You can set a max point count, which would be, again, very useful for this project. And then, well, I haven't looked into this, but I assume you can make it so that it'll scale with the faces or not. But this node, this could use a little bit of expansion, shall we say. I would assume that would be like more of a community task rather than, the devs implementing that. Or maybe we can make our own. I could make my own node that does that, but it would be just a little bit of a pain because of triangulation. I wonder if there's a way to... Yeah, maybe I could look up a way of putting points on faces, whether they're triangles or n-gons. But that would be a bit of a pain. But I could look it up. We'll see. Let me read the chat again. The particle effect is legendary, mate. Wow, why thank you. A lot then, yeah. A lot of hours in Blender. Sometimes I wish the sun stayed out for 24 hours so that I could end my projects. Every time I wake up and start new projects, so much to dig in. You want more time in a day to do stuff. I have felt like that, but then I realized that that's not good. That means that you're stretching yourself too thin. I have definitely brought myself to the verge of burning out for a long time. And that's not good. Like, I've taken time off, well, not enough time off, but I've taken time off to do, like, 2D art and stuff like that. Just stuff for myself, not for social media or anything like that. Just because, doing the math, it wears on you. Especially when you feel like you have to become a physicist overnight. That's for doing stuff like rigid body physics and such, which... I'm assuming in the future the Blender devs would make a version of like the building blocks for a rigid body system that you wouldn't have to implement yourself. But since I'm like, I want it now, I am choosing to learn physics to hopefully implement it myself, which I have a semi-working version, even though the math is still shaky at best. It's just the collisions. Like, you want to do continuous collisions, and then that's weird because you have to use a raycast, but then that won't be accurate if your object has a radius of anything other than just an infinitesimally small point. But then if you have something that has a shape like a rigid body, you have to do multiple iterations, which is good, but then the rotation screws it all up, and then the friction doesn't apply if you do it that way, so you need to store the normal of a given point at the point of impact, but then you need to figure out a way to do that over multiple steps. And then you have to figure out the force, and then that, and then the rotational force, the rotational axis. You need to use an arctan too. No, not an arctan. An arccosine of the dot product of this normal and all that. Needless to say, It's been a little bit much. But yeah. So back to this project. As you can see, it'll work within any shape of object, any topology. The UV maps will remain the same. Like, once you have it set up, like the animations to be the same, no matter what topology you throw at it, it will work. The only thing that needs to be the same is that part of the node setup and this part. Fortunately, they can't be the same node group. But maybe sometime in the future, there'll be a way to sync up. Technically, I could have a value here. And then either with a view layer attribute or with a driver reference that. But that would be one hell of a stretch. And it wouldn't be... like, well, actually, like, I'm trying to avoid setting the value on the geometry. At least this value, the animatable value. So that auto updates. Like the noise texture, that will always have to be manually made the same between the two. You just can't have... you can't have a node group that's the same between both. That would be sci-fi technology, which I don't see coming anytime soon. Because if you had one node that was different between those two, and the code's all different between all these, it would complain big time. But, yeah. Maybe in the future there could be a node group where, like, say you can plug in a texture and then, well, we don't have texture references in the shader editor. That's something that people have been wanting for a long time. And there's been a developer that's been looking to add in different data types into the shader editor. Like the Boolean and the rotation, maybe? I forget. But who knows? Maybe we'll get that consistency. Consistency in the shader editor has been a bit of an issue with GeoNodes. In Blender. The shader editor has been falling behind with all the other advancements. Even with stuff like, say, texture references, which would be essential there. And the scene time node, which would be essential. But I think it'll come in time. It just needs either community developers, which I think that part is being implemented by a community developer, not like one of the full-time Blender ones. I'm not sure about that one. I would have to double check. But yeah. So, yeah. I wish there were more ways to access topology. I just made a subdivision node that combines multiple levels of subdivision, and it's a pain. I'm interested what you mean by multiple levels of subdivision. Combines them. Like you store the data on the subdivision node and then it goes through the other ones and then just keeps the data on all of them? Like you just do an iteration of Like if you had, say, the repeat zone and then you had a subdivision node in there, which technically the subdivide mesh node has a repeat zone built into it. That's what this thing does. So these two technically kind of do the same thing. That's one thing that the Blender devs showcased in one of their first things. The repeat zone would just be the subdivision mesh iteration again, because it's the same code. Like storing like the indices on each one and then giving each one as the name would go up a different oh, dang it. Oh, wait. Oh, wait a gosh darn seconds. That would work. You can... oh, dang it. Oh, that's something I never even considered. You can assign multiple named attributes with the value to string node. And you could also use, wait a second, utilities, wait, where's, oh, text. Join strings, or wait, what's the other thing? Let's just get a string node. You can have a name like, oh, ID data, and then you just add 1 every time the thing goes through. Another reason why we should have the loop input, but the Blender dev specifically did not want that in this node because they thought people would misuse this as a for each loop if that was available. Something that a few Blender people, a few of the big geometry node creators, including myself, disagreed with. But the Blender devs did say that they will potentially add it, they'll probably add it when the for each loop comes around. We just need to wait for that. I'm hoping it's in 4.1, but I kind of doubt it because they mentioned that the capture attribute node might need some tweaking before that happens. And I don't see that happening in 4.0, which also means that since it was recently mentioned by, I think, Delay in the latest Blender Today live stream, that geometry nodes will be taking a break. For in quarter 1 and 2 of this year, it is planned for, oh, that's a new part of the UI. It's planned for geometry nodes to have basically no development. That's specifically what they said. Essentially no development in quarter 1 so that they can focus on Grease Pencil version 3 and the compositor. And then in quarters 3 and 4 of 2024, they'll add in new stuff. I'll have to admit, I was very sad when I heard that because geometry nodes development has been a little slow recently. Like with the simulation nodes, those got implemented, but a bug came up and that bug hasn't been fixed almost 5 months, maybe 6 months later. Or maybe, wait, did I see 7 months on that problem? I think it's been 7 months since that thing was known. And that's a breaking bug. Like that bug is so... Things that I made in 3.5, in the beta of 3.5 before, simulation nodes were in 3. Were they in 3.5? In one of the alphas. I made projects in there that I cannot bring into 3.6, 4.0, and, well, it'll probably be fixed in 4.1. But due to that material bug, that's a just straight up show-stopping bug. Or... They said it's not, it was caused because of a bug. So I think that makes it qualify as a bug. Materials officially are quote-unquote not supported, but it was due to a bug. To avoid an unstable bug. So it's a bug. But, what was I saying? Oh wait, there we go. So... Just as a little side note from that kind of unfortunate topic. This is something I just didn't even consider. With the repeat zone, you could just store multiple named attributes, each of them with their own unique data. So, as this grid subdivides, I can automatically go and store the data, even if it gets propagated. Like here we can see 1 and 1 is on the... Oh, sorry, new vertices. And I could just keep going and keep adding. I should not do that. I could go and keep adding named attributes. So this could be... Well, we can't... Another thing that is a little unfortunate with GeoNodes, getting data into is its biggest weakness. Or... maybe one of its biggest weaknesses. Like, say you wanted to get all the vertex groups into your scene. Well, one, vertex groups are not a standard attribute yet. Some under the hood things need to be changed. But you can't go through a list of attributes. Like, say you wanted to get the second color attribute on the list. You can't do that. You just can't access the list of attributes in a geometry. I think that's, like, loosely planned, but then again... Since it's loosely planned, it won't be a thing until probably 2020, well, quarter 4 2024, so next year, and such. So if you wanted to go and iterate on every single group on, say, an armature, where it's like, okay, take every single group, blur them, which I've done before. Just, well, I've done it on a few manually because it was easier than going through with the brushes. The brushes are a little, like, implementing a brush manually is a little inconsistent, and I know there are ways of blurring it, but since I'm a GeoNodes head, I want to do it through GeoNodes. But to automate that process, that would be a little better. Like, you could technically... Actually, wait. Named attribute. You could technically automate it if all of these have, say... Like, if you had this set up so that you would have group, and then there would be a value to string node. But wait. Yeah, you would have to do this a little funky, but it would work. So you would need to have... Wait, not that. You would need to have 0.00. Like, this is really deep into the weeds of geometry nodes. But it could work. Like, if you have it with... How would that do? Yeah, you could potentially make it so that it would go through each one in the list, if they are all numbered to a certain amount. Kind of undoing what I'm doing here. So it's possible, in theory. But, also a pain in the butt. So, that might come eventually. I think it is technically planned, but very loosely. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because I have not thought about doing that before. It's pretty niche to go and create new named attributes over each iteration, but I can think of ways where that would be quite useful. So thank you. See, right now, I should wrap up the stream. The effect is done. It needs some prettying up. I'm thinking of having a nice model made for it, like a helmet model, to show it off on. The material needs work. Like, the UV map is cool. And I think that showcases, like, oh, the colors are inherited by the shape. But, yeah, anything. Let's see. Using GeoNodes, patching... Using them in GeoNodes, I can't use subdivision surface. Oh, using a patch of GeoNodes, you can't use subdivision surface. Interesting. I did it without assigning multiple attributes, but it's held together by duct tape because in the end I had to patch a few holes in the mesh. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, that's a much more complicated thing than I was thinking about. If I understood that. How can I show you some of my Blender animations? I guess it would take some videos. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. If you're meaning that you want to show me some of your work, I guess maybe, like, at me on Twitter? I'm a little unsure of what you want me to, like, review them or something along those lines. Which maybe I can do? Maybe? Let's see. You could billboard the normals to the screen so it doesn't look like there are shadows on them. Oh, that's the issue. Billboarding the particles to the screen. We can't really do that yet. Like, another kind of quirk about GeoNodes. Setting certain types of object data are still out of reach. Like, there's the point clouds. That's the old version of point clouds that we used to have. But there was also, where was this? It's been ages since I've used the old particle system, because this one is extremely limited in the age of GeoNodes. Even though it has a collision system that's so good, and I wish I could just yoink that out and then put it into my system. But you have stuff like halo, line, path, object, collection. But, actually, wait, where'd it go? It wasn't line. But this would be used for, like, particle trails. That we can implement in GeoNodes. It's still hacky as all heck. Path? No, that was something different. What was it? Object? There was something that you could do. What was it? Wait, is it gone? Okay, maybe this is just the Mandela effect. But I could have sworn... could have sworn that there was... Was it just the halo object? There was a billboard setting for these, where they would always point towards not only the camera, but the viewport camera as well. And there's also the hair curve object. You can't set something as a hair curve object. That automatically renders the thickness of the hair on the GPU. I'm assuming, yeah, it's on the GPU. I'll need to think about that. But with like the, I know we're going on so many tangents today, but I'm okay with it. If you have, say, I'll need to undo this because the curve, yeah, like the fur preset, which is a little funky. I'll just say that because it adds it parents that's like a Python, like that's kind of like add-on territory right there. It adds an object, but the object has modifiers on it, and it parents it to this object and also gets data from that object. The hair objects are weird. They're very weird. Like the, what was it? The deform, like, look at this. It adds that many, like, But the surface deform node, like this is a black box, which is this is the weirdest geometry node. It references attributes that are set by geometry nodes. Or, well, that could be set by geometry nodes. It references the, I think, yeah, the rest position and the surface UV coordinate. I'm not sure about the normal, but it references all of those, and you can't change it, which is very weird. It's a bit odd. Usually black box nodes like this... Oh, what was I gonna say? Yeah, the hair tools are very weird. They feel a little disjointed from regular geonodes. They were made for the these were made for the, which was it, Sprite Fright or Charge? I think it was Charge. I'm pretty sure it was Charge. But they were made for that Blender Studio thing. But as we can see here, there's no curve to mesh node here. These are just rendered as hair things. And it works. Yeah, it's just, that just works. But we can't have an object and then set that data. We can have something be a curve in GeoNodes. We can set it as a curve, but we can't label it as curve with the rendered hair on it, which is an odd quirk of GeoNodes. Here, let me go and undo this because I don't want, like, look at these hair nodes. Look at them. That's not, well, these, like, look at this. Look at this. I've tried to decipher these, but man, this is something else. This is, how do you decipher this? This is, yeah. Like, this isn't even labeled. Actually, yeah. Only a few of these are actually labeled. Or, no, most of them are. Some of them aren't. But yeah, this is quite the thing in the nodes versus code debate. Because, this is, oof. And I do have to wonder, because I've looked through the, well, I've made my own version of the deformed curves on surface node. And in some cases, it's faster than the other one by 10 times, but not always. It's complicated. It depends on how many curves there are on the thing, but anyway. With the shape key node that was in Sprite Fright, it's not included in Blender, it's purely on that one. I was looking through it and I was able to heavily optimize that because with that node, they split the physical mesh when they could have, and then referenced the was it they split the mesh when they could have just used a face corner attribute. And they did that several times, which significantly slowed down that system for just getting curve to mesh UVs. The tangent space. Which you would have to do that multiple times in a mesh. Which means it would slow it down so much. With my setups, I try to make them as real-time as possible. Like with this one, it's on the verge of real-time, as we can see. It dips down just because Blender doesn't like instances. Like we don't, how many? Yeah, if you go above like 30k instances, it just freaks out. It really doesn't like it. At least when rendering. Does it start? Yeah, it starts lagging even in the viewport. Yeah, Blender does not like too many instances, which I'm assuming that's because of the way it handles object drawing, but I don't know enough about that to talk about it. But yeah, if all these were realized, it would be significantly faster, just because it wouldn't have to do as much stuff. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, by the way, this could also be used for like a Thanos snap effect. Just a little bit edited, but just to put that out there. I should put in some wind, because I could put in gravity. Let's go into here. Okay, let's go back to the outline. Let's go and reorganize this. Blender's UI is very good. Blender has one of the best UIs out of any software I've used, which, to be fair, is very limited. But Erosion also has a good UI, though. But that program is very specialized. Houdini's UI, it's not terrible, but there are too many icons from 2012. Yeah. I wonder if there are like themes for like add-ons or themes that you can get for it that kind of streamline the UI, because there are a lot of icons that you don't need to see all the time, like adding in a torus and a lot of other things. Like you could probably collapse the window. I need to look in, yeah. I still need to look into that. Well, Blender has a very good UI. Unreal Engine, I have many complaints about its UI, especially with nodes. Unreal Engine has a lot of functionality, but the UI I have some issues with. It's not too bad. It's functional, but it feels clunky compared to Blender. Yeah, what was it? And I remember in Unreal Engine 4, they had like the striped top to it, which made it feel like it was from 2012. So Unreal 5 got rid of that, which was really good. But the nodes and all that still retain some of the Unreal Engine 4 stuff, which is like the aesthetics, which I'm not the biggest fan of. Let's see, this is points. Mesh. I used to despise the pre-2.8 Blender UI. Fair enough. I grew up using that Blender UI. I forget when I joined into Blender. Was it 2.5? Like, I've been using Blender for a long time, on and off, but since it's become my career and all that, I'm using it a lot more heavily. Unity's UI was good. I just remembered. Unity's UI was fair. Well, actually, Unity's UI was good, but for one of the projects I was on, we used some specialized tools. And, oh, yeah, that game's out. I can say this now. I worked on Party Animals, and we used some stuff for that. Well, I'll just stay on the side of caution. We used some specialized tools, which had some pretty good UIs. But yeah, that was a good project. My first job. My first, like a proper 3D job. Yeah. What was I doing here? I keep playing the animation. I've been talking for so long. but people seem to be enjoying it. Pre 2.7. Oh, right, wait, was it 2.7 or 2.8 that the new UI came around? I used the old Blender UI, and I thought that was okay. Looking back, oh man, it has some issues. It's like, my biggest issue with it is the tone of gray that they chose. Man, that was something. And then the icons were a little too odd. The collection system, like, they just added in 4.0 bone collections. Like, the old layer system, which was in 2.8 and all 2.7, 2.8, that was not good. They didn't have labels. It was bad. It was just bad. 2.8 was the biggest jump in Blender's history. I wonder if they'll ever do a jump that big again. It was pre-COVID. It feels like post-COVID some things have slowed down. I guess worldwide. Like, COVID really did a number on every single industry that I've seen. Oh yeah, no, every industry. But, yeah. COVID. COVID was a interesting time for me. Yeah. Let's see. I could go in more into that because I was working on party animals during partly COVID times, but yeah. 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 Blender 2.79 got the principled BSDF node right before they went to 2.8. Yeah, that was good. The principled node was very good. And then in in 4.0 they got the subpanel version of the principled node, which is really good. I would have, like, that's one of the things where looking back, it's like, oh wait, there are a lot of things with Blender where looking back, you're like, oh wait, that should have had it from the start. But it's good that we have it now. Better late than never is the motto with all this. What was I going to do? I completely forgot. Oh, wind. That was the thing. So let's add in some gravity and just take a look at that. Just oop, okay, well, that's something. Not what we want, but it is something. 0.5. Yeah, I should turn off the cache. I mean, that's an effect in and of itself. Not the best, but it is an effect. Yeah, why is this so powerful? There we go. So the normal is being a little bit funky, but it's alright. And we don't have self-collisions with this, because part collisions are a pain in the butt. So, yeah. So this can give it a little bit of falling to it. Like, if I just turned off the noise, like, these numbers are a lot lower than I usually use. Like, if just bump up the normal, it's like, whoosh. Funny. Not what we want, though. Control Z. Yeah, they seem to have fixed the bug. The Control Z bug. That's good. Yep. Alright. I'll add in a few more things, but I think I should wrap up the stream. It's almost at an hour and 45 minutes. Alright, I'll wrap it up. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all had a very fun time watching this effect come together. It's not the most complicated. Like, I really stretched out this effect. Like, the particle system's the most complicated part, but that's just, you know, adding in the attributes that we usually do. Like, eventually, I should make node groups for all of this that I can just, well, I do have a node group system for that. It's just, I don't use assets. I just make everything from scratch every single time. But eventually I'll need to do that. Yeah. That's another reason why I'm taking a I'm going to learn Houdini, or at least a good amount of it. The logic is very similar, because it's like, oh, you get the attributes, you edit them, you do whatever you want. I wonder how easy this would be able to be done in Houdini. I think I've seen people do this, but it would be on the actual geometry basis. Let's see. I sent you a message on Twitter. I'll probably be able to see... Well, I won't make promises on when I'll be able to respond, because I have things to do right after the stream, but I will take a look at it. See, this does look pretty cool. Just the particles, they don't billboard correctly. That's unfortunate. But it does look pretty cool. I like that. Yeah, let's set up the camera just before I kind of get going. Yeah, let's go and leave it like... Oh yeah, why is it not going on that? Ah, okay, there we go. I was like, wait, why is it not doing that? Okay. And probably the underneath material shouldn't be as shiny as I'm making it out to be, but that's on the shader editor. Like, I just need to put some cool stuff in here. Actually, I have a little bit of an idea. I'll use a magic texture. This can give a very cool, like, bumpy look. So let me try to do this. Let me just get rid of that. That means this will also have to be a mix node. So I'll have to put that into there so that we can switch between two different versions. But wait, that won't mix between the height correctly. Ah, dang it. So we can see that happen. Here, we just need to go and scale it up by a significant degree. And then we'll need to scale it down by a significant degree. I could just... Yeah. Let me just go and do this. Yeah, I'll need to work on the shader, but that's easy compared to what I've done here. And that's a cool look. And then I'll need, again... Maybe I should just mix the shaders. That might be a better way of doing it. Like, just have one shader that's the underneath material, one that's an above material. Because I still need to make another material for the top. One that's very, you know, rugged and all that good stuff. I could just... And also the roughness. Now, lots of things that just need little edits here and there. I could make this glowy. I could do a lot of stuff. But I want to try this on different objects. Just seeing how... What did I plug that? Ah, I plugged that... Why did I plug that into the alpha? Alright, we're almost at 1 hour and 50 minutes. I gotta call it very, very soon. Very, very soon. Yeah, I'll do this off stream. This doesn't... Is there something wrong with the... Okay, the colors just felt a little bit... Maybe... Yeah, it's the roughness, isn't it? There we go. That's a bit better. Yeah, I'll do a little bit of work off camera. Then when I post it, you'll see it'll be completely different. Probably not. It'll be similar to this. And I might develop this effect a bit further. We'll see. Alright, but thank you all for watching. Let's see. Thanks for the streams. Been watching it sometimes 5 to 6 times now since I discovered you lately. I feel much more comfortable swimming through the nodes. Hey, that's good. That's why I'm doing this. Like, a good amount of this is my developer log, where I'm like, okay, this is what I learned today. And then I'm sharing it so that other people don't have to go through the headache that I did. But, yeah. Like, eventually, in a few years, like right now we're 3 years into GeoNodes. The first year they had the only named attribute system, and then that quickly got replaced. Well, 1 year later it got replaced by the field systems, so most of the nodes had to be remade. So I guess technically we're 2 years into GeoNodes. And right now we're in the, okay, let's try to make the asset phase, where let's make stuff so that people can make their own assets. Or so we can make node groups. Right now, as we can see, the hair nodes are a little bit much. But I think in the future, there'll be quite a few very useful nodes that we'll just be able to plop in, and then they'll just work. Hopefully without too much spaghetti. We'll see. There was a version of GeoNodes that I saw in the developer chats when they were making the transition from the only named attribute system, which I worked in that system for quite a while. Wait, it was a year, wasn't it? It was like either 9 months to a year. Like that system, it doesn't work in Blender anymore. If I open up an old file that has that, they just get redlined. But it took so many nodes to do everything. Like everything. Like imagine the named attribute node, it was different than this one. Where it would have two named attributes, the input and the output, essentially. Chain up like 5 of those together. And then you could do, well, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, well, 7. So chain 7 of these together, and you would be able to do mostly what I've done in this little box right here. Every single node would have to be like this. So it was so inefficient. And not great. So they decided, which this was a brilliant idea, let's make it like the shader editor. Let's implement the vector math nodes to the point where you can copy nodes from here over to the shader editor. Just Control-C. Let me copy this a ton because Control-C with frames doesn't really like to work. And then we Control-V. A few of them disappear because they're not supported. But, like, that's really good. That is synergy between the editors. The editors. But yeah. Yeah, geometry nodes, it has a very good foundation at the moment. With its current mix of, hey, it's like a shader editor. That's a very good way to lean people into it. Because people get used to the shader editor. Because it's like, oh, wait, I can do this with that and that with that. And then with the colors are so good. Houdini lacks the wire colors, which I'm very saddened by. But it makes sense because of the way it works. You're not really stringing attributes from node to node. Unless you're, well, that's a topic for another time. But yeah. I might do a Houdini stream eventually, but I'm not comfortable enough with it. Let's see. In the last Blender today, they said the development of geometry nodes might take a break for the first quarter of the year to focus on grease pencil and animation projects. Yes. They basically said, essentially that there will be no development. They said that. They said no development for little to no development for the first 1 or 2 quarters of that year. Which means that will probably be 2 quarters. There's been... With Blender recently, like 4.0 is already on its 2nd version, and it's not been out that long. There have been quite a few bugs with it. There have been features that haven't been able to be completed, like the subpanels, simulation nodes. Simulation nodes. Even they were implemented in 3.6 in a very unfinished state. In 4.0, they didn't have time to fix it. In 4.1, they'll probably fix it because the checkpoint node is coming, and that relies on the same tech. And subpanels might be completed in 4.1 as well. I think they said that they would, but I would need to double check on that. But there hasn't been enough time, as shown by the nodes that have been implemented in a very incomplete state. So the plan going forward was to get the developers to focus on one project at a time. This project will get attention. This project will get attention, like the compositor was one of the named ones, and the grease pencil one, which the grease pencil is kind of tangential to geometry nodes, because that, they're trying to make that compatible with geometry nodes because it'll be a lot more powerful that way. But the compositor needs a lot of love. That thing is very much in, like the 2014 days, 2012 days. It can't use the GPU when rendering. Offsetting the UV maps isn't really great. Do we even have math nodes? I was trying to do something in there before, and then I was like, no, I'm just going to do my compositing in Eevee with a regular shader editor. When it comes to that, when you're like, I'm just going to use Eevee to do compositing, like, here, let's try to get a math node. You have the math node. Oh, yeah, we do have that. Do we have vector math? Vector. Yeah, we don't have the vector math node, which is pretty essential for if you want to start doing fancy things in here. We have the separate XYZ node, which is interesting. Yeah, what utilities do we have? Math, map value, map range. We don't have a float curve. Yeah, a lot of this is, it hasn't really benefited from the advancements in the other editors. Oh, it has the vector curves node. That's interesting. Does it have the color RGB curves? Okay, it does have, okay, yeah. So that's good. But it's very interesting that it doesn't have the vector math node when it has the separate XYZ node. So that one, it needs love. The map UV node, this one I still haven't figured out how this works because it doesn't work the way you think it would. It either adds or it replaces the UV map that's fed into this node, which is interesting. It's a legacy thing. We'll see what happens with it, but it's good that they are focusing on it. But I do hope that some polishing can happen to GeoNodes in that time. Like, maybe not new features, but polish on the old ones, like the curved mesh UV, maybe some more data. You know, because developer time is very precious, and finding ways to optimize that would be good. But yeah, the plan, it's gonna upset quite a few people. I mean, 4.0 and 4.1 are having some controversial changes, let's just say. And going forward, having a more unified approach to what things are being developed, having the developers focused on one project at a time, I think will be really good, because things have been a little bit scattered. So seeing that focusing happening is good. And also, another issue with not enough time for projects to be developed. This year there were 4 Blender updates, 4 main Blender updates. Many fewer ones because of the bugs. But in 2024 there will be 3. Because they needed more time. And it's good that they are adapting. They're changing what they're doing to make it better management-wise. But yes, that is... I'm hopeful for the future of GeoNodes. Like, it has a very good foundation. It just needs some... It'll be very good going forward. It just needs better ways of getting data into it, because right now drivers are a little bit clunky. And lists would, those are planned. It'll be good. We just need to get there. Yep. Alright, thank you all for watching. This project turned out well. Took way too long just because I've been yapping so much. I've been talking way too much. But again, I have to say, don't be mean to the developers. Don't say, hey, implement this thing. Don't say, hey, resurrect the Blender game engine. They're doing a lot. So if you have a suggestion or feedback, do it through the proper channels. Do it in a kind, constructive way. So, can't stress that enough. But thank you all for watching. And geometry nodes, it's good. I'm hoping to bring some Houdini spice into that. I've been doing that for a while now, just by referencing Houdini tutorials and such. But now, with me, I'm actually planning on starting to learn it. And if I learn that, I can bring that into here. Support the donation campaign if you can, yes. I'm a contributor to Blender. I think I'm gold, I think it was, per month. But if you can do a one-time donation, if you can do a one-time donation, please do it. It's open source, always will be, but it needs your funding. And if Blender becomes super funded, then that means they can hire more developers and make better stuff for all of us. So, yeah. Donate to the Blender Foundation if you haven't already. In my case, Blender has been very formative in my life. It has opened up many doors to many jobs, many opportunities, and it has been a very positive impact. So giving back is good. So yeah, do it if you can. Alright, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.